Please, I am begging you. You are my friends. You are my family. I did not ask for the prophecy. I did not ask for any of this. Please.
She has taken our destiny. Push her.
Wait. She's our friend. We cannot do this.
She took what was supposed to be ours. Do it.
Adayeza, we have been friends since we were 6 years old. Please, I am begging you. Please.
She begged them. They pushed her anyway.
The word moved through Abara the way all terrible truths move, faster than anyone wanted, slower than it felt. Amara is alive. Amara has returned. By the time she reached the center of the village square, the crowd had already arranged itself the way crowds arrange themselves around things they do not know how to look at directly. People at the edges, a wide, unplanned clearing at the center. And in that clearing, standing still, in clean, deep indigo, Amara. She did not perform the return. That was the first thing people would remember afterward. She did not raise her arms or weep or call out to anyone. She simply walked, and the road received her, and the village received her, and the morning received her the way mornings receive things that have always been meant to happen. The man beside her was unknown to them, tall, quiet, standing slightly behind her the way men stand when they are choosing to give a woman the space she is owed. He wore the fine cloth of someone with rank and the posture of someone who had learnt that rank was not the most interesting thing about him. Mama Chinyere emerged from the edge of the crowd. She was not hurrying, she never hurried, but there was a directness to her movement, a purposefulness, as though the air between her and Amara was simply an obstacle she was done with. She stopped in front of Amara and looked at her for a long moment. Then she placed both hands on Amara's face, the way a mother holds a child she thought she had lost, and closed her eyes and said nothing that anyone could hear. When she opened her eyes again, she turned to face the crowd.
The one who was given is still standing. Let anyone who doubted the word of Ofo examine what they are standing in today. Let anyone who acted against this child examine what they are standing in today.
Still nobody moved, but in 3 different places in that crowd, 3 bodies went rigid in 3 different ways. Ngozi's chin lifted, the way it did when she was frightened, and had decided that looking unbothered was the same as being unbothered. Chidima's hands went still at her sides, every finger flat against her wrapper, the posture of a person trying to take up no space. And Adeze, who had always been the first to speak in any room, said nothing. For perhaps the first time in her life, she said nothing. Amara's eyes had found them already. She did not look away. She did not rush toward them. She simply looked the way she had always looked at people, fully, without judgment and without mercy, because in her there was never a distinction between the two. To be truly seen by Amara was to be seen without the protection of someone else's willingness to lie to you. Ngozi was the first to look away, then Chidima. Adeze held the longest, 2 seconds, 3, 4. Her face a mask of composure so rigid it had become its own confession. And then she too looked at the ground. It was Kolade who broke the silence of the crowd, not with words, but by stepping forward and speaking quietly to the nearest elder. A brief introduction, a family name, a village name. The elder's eyes widened. He turned and murmured to the man beside him, and the murmur moved outward through the gathered crowd. And then something shifted in the square. Something that had been heavy, tilted slightly, tilted towards something else. The man beside Amara was a prince. He had come to Abara of his own accord, to stand beside the woman the village had buried.
Daughter.
His voice was rougher than usual. He was not a man who showed feeling easily, so when he showed it, it was impossible to miss.
You were owed protection. This village failed you. I failed you. Whatever comes next will begin with that being said in the open, before all who are here.
A murmur moved through the crowd. Not disagreement. The murmur of a community confronting a thing it had known, somewhere beneath knowing, since the night she disappeared. Amara looked at the elder. She did not rush to absolve him, did not offer the quick kindness of, "It is all right," that would have let everyone breathe easier. She let the words sit. She let the village hold them for a moment. Then, quietly,
Then let what comes next begin.
she did not look again at her 3 former friends. She did not need to. The square was small. There was nowhere to stand that was not within her sight. And the 3 women who had once been the people she loved most in the world stood in the crowd like stones dropped into water, motionless at the center of something that was already ripping outward and would not stop until it reached every edge. The reckoning had begun. It had not yet spoken their names, but it would. 3 days passed before anything was said out loud. This was not patience. This was the particular silence of a community that already knows a thing and is deciding collectively how much it is willing to pay to say it. Abara was not a village of fools. It had eyes and it had memory. And it had the long, practiced wisdom of people who have learned to read what is not spoken. When Amara disappeared, there had been a version of events. She fell, it was dark, the ridge was dangerous, and the village had accepted it the way people accept explanations that are possible rather than true. Because the alternative required looking at 3 women it had known since birth and naming what they had done. And naming a thing makes it real. And a real thing demands a response. So, the village had chosen the explanation that cost less. It had not forgotten the other one. Now, Amara was standing in the square, and Mama Chinyere had spoken, and the chief elder had spoken, and there was a prince from Edu standing among them, and the version that cost less was no longer holding. You could see it in how people moved, the way they adjusted their paths to avoid walking too close to where Ngozi stood, the careful absence of greetings that Chidima had always received easily and now had to wait for. The way conversations did not stop when Adeaze entered them, but simply became slightly less warm, slightly more clipped at the edges. A coldness so precise and consistent, it could only be communal. Nobody decided this. Nobody announced it. It was the village's oldest technology, the slow, coordinated withdrawal of welcome, and it moved through Abara like weather. On the first day, Amara stayed in her family's compound. Her mother had not slept the night before her return. She had been awake instead in the manner of a woman who had spent months learning a kind of grief and now had to learn its undoing. She held her mother's face in her hands for a long time before she said anything.
I knew. I did not know how to know it.
I know, Mama.
I let them come here. After, I let them sit in my compound and eat and speak your name with grief in their mouths, and
You did not know what you know now.
I knew enough. Every mother knows enough. I did not want to know more.
Amara held her mother's hands and said nothing, because there was nothing to say that would be truer than the silence, and she had never wasted words on what silence could carry better. Kolade was received in her family's compound with a careful formality that gradually gave way to something warmer, the way formal things give way when the person at the center of them is clearly at ease and clearly choosing to be there. He helped her father carry water without being asked. He sat with her younger brothers and answered their questions about Edu without condescension. He did not announce himself as anything other than a man who made a choice and was standing in it.
Her mother watched him across the compound that first evening and said quietly to no one in particular,
He came himself. He did not send anyone. He came himself.
It was the thing she had needed to say out loud to know she had truly received it. On the second day, the 3 women came separately to Amara's compound. Separately because none of them had been able to agree on whether to come together, and none of them had been willing to admit they were afraid to face her alone. And so in the end, each arrived alone, and each was worse off for it. Ngozi came first at mid-morning. She was dressed carefully, which is how you could tell she was frightened. When Ngozi dressed with that particular care, every detail deliberate, nothing left unmanaged, it meant she had decided that if what was inside her was unraveling, then the outside would hold the shape. She stood at the entrance of the compound, and Amara's mother looked at her for a long moment before going inside to call Amara. And that pause, brief, measured, the pause of a woman deciding whether to offer the courtesy at all, said more than any word she could have chosen. Amara came out. She did not rush. They stood in the compound entrance and looked at each other, and the air between them was full of the history of girls who had grown into women and done unforgivable things, and were now in the wreckage of it.
You are alive!
Yes.
She stopped. Whatever she had prepared on the walk over had apparently decided not to come.
I do not know what to say to you. Then do not say anything you have not meant.
The warning was soft, but it was a warning.
I am sorry. For what specifically?
Ngozi blinked. She had expected the apology to function as a door, something that once opened would let her pass through into the easier space on the other side. Amara had not opened the door. She was standing in front of it.
For what happened on the ridge,
Say it plainly.
A long silence. Something moved across Ngozi's face. Shame, and beneath it, the older habit of finding a way around it.
For what we did, what I did.
Amara looked at her for a moment longer, then she nodded once, not in forgiveness, but in acknowledgement. She had heard the words. She had not yet decided what to do with them.
I have heard you.
It was not what Ngozi had come for, but it was what Ngozi had earned. Chidima came at midday and said very little, which was unlike her. She had always filled spaces with her family's name and her family's money, and now she had nothing to offer that the situation wanted. She stood in the compound and wept genuinely in a way that was ugly and unmanaged, and therefore the most honest thing she had perhaps ever offered Amara in her life. Amara did not comfort her. She waited until the weeping had run its course, and then she gave Amara water, the simple, practical kindness of someone who understands that a person who has been crying needs water, and sent her home. Adiaze did not come that day. She came at dusk on the third day, after the compound had grown quiet, and she did not weep and she did not apologize. She stood in the entrance and looked at Amara with an expression that was the most complicated thing her face had ever attempted.
You should have told me. If the prophecy was yours, you should have told me what that meant. You should have seen what it would do to me.
The audacity of it landed in the compound like something thrown.
I did not choose the prophecy, Adiaze.
Neither did I, but I was the one who had to watch you receive it. And so you pushed me off a cliff.
The words were quiet, absolutely quiet. The kind of quiet that has no room inside it for anything except exactly what was said. Adiaze opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again.
I know why you came. Go home, Adiaze. What happens next will not begin in this compound. It will begin in the square, in front of the people who also need to hear it. Go home.
And because there was nothing else to say and nowhere else to stand, Adiaze went. The sun finished setting. In the compound, Amara sat with her mother and said nothing for a long time, and the night came in around them, familiar and unhurried. The square had been patient for 3 days. It would not be patient much longer.
The gathering was called by the chief elder on the 4th day. No one was surprised. The village had been waiting for it the way you wait for rain you can already smell. Not with dread exactly, but with the particular held breath of people who know that what is coming will change the air, and that afterward, the air will need to have been changed. By the time the drum spoke, the square was already full. People had come from the outer compounds, from the farms, from the market women who had left their stores without covering them, which was how you knew the thing being called was serious. Children were told to sit at the edges and be quiet, and they were, because even children understand when the weight in a room is not for them. The elders sat at the front in the old way. Mama Chinyere was already there when everyone arrived, already seated, already still, the way she was always already inside the moment before the moment began. Amara came with her mother and her father and her brothers. She wore indigo again, not as statement, not as theater. She wore it because it was what she had, and she had never dressed to perform, and she was not about to start. Kolade walked beside her and did not hold her hand because she had not reached for hers, and he had learned already that Amara moved through hard things with her hands at her own sides. The 3 women came separately, which the village noticed. They had always arrived at gatherings together, the 4 of them, for so many years that their arrival as a unit had become unremarkable. Now there were 3 of them, and they were not together, and the space where the 4th should have been was occupied instead by the woman they had tried to make a ghost. Ngozi found a place near the left side of the gathering. Her face was composed, but her wrapper was immaculate, every fold deliberate, and those who knew her understood what that meant. Chidima sat beside her mother, which she had not done at a public gathering since she was a young girl, a child's instinct to put a parent between yourself and what is coming. Adiaze stood at the back and looked straight ahead at nothing, her jaw set, performing stillness so hard it had become its own kind of motion. Chief Elder Obiora rose. He was an old man who had led this village through drought and dispute and the death of children and the slow accumulated grief of a community that has survived long enough to lose many things. He had not always gotten everything right. He had not gotten this right. He stood with that knowledge visible on him, not as apology, but as ballast. The weight of a man who has decided to hold a thing rather than put it down.
We gather because something happened in this village that this village must now face fully. Not in compounds, not in whispers, not in the careful language of people who'd rather be comfortable than honest. Here, now, with all of us present.
He let that sit.
Amara, daughter of this soil, was thrown from the ridge at Kogolu on the night of the harvest ceremony. She did not fall. She was pushed by people who sat in this square and accepted condolences for a death they had made.
The square was so quiet, you could hear the wind in the palm fronds at the far edge of the market.
She is alive because the river was not finished with her. Because a man with kind eyes found her at dawn, and because destiny, as the priestess told us, does not negotiate. She is here, and what was done to her will be spoken. And what was done to her will be spoken. And those who did it will speak it themselves. Before this community, before their families, before the faces of people who trusted them.
He turned and looked at the three women. The square turned with him. It was Chidima who broke first, which surprised people later when they talked about it, because Chidima had always been the most composed of the three. Her emotions managed behind the buffer of her family's wealth and her careful social arithmetic. But perhaps that was exactly why. She had spent her whole life calculating the cost of things, and standing in that square, with every face she had known since childhood turned toward her, she finally ran the numbers on what this had cost and found she could not hold the sum. She rose from beside her mother. Her mother did not reach for her. Her mother sat very still with her eyes forward, the posture of a woman confronting something about her child she had suspected and had not wanted to confirm.
I was there. I did not push her, but I did not stop it. I stood at the edge of that ridge and I said nothing and I did nothing and I walked home and I let this village believe she had fallen. I told myself that I had not done the worst thing. I told myself that made me different from the one who had. I know now that there is no good position in what happened on that ridge. There is only what I failed to do and what I let happen and the lie I carried for all the months she was gone.
She sat down. Her mother still did not look at her. Ngozi rose next. She had been crying since Chidima began speaking, silently, the tears moving down her face without her doing anything to stop them or hide them, which was the first unperformed thing she had offered the village in as long as anyone could remember.
I was there. I did not push her. I also did not push back. When I understood what was being decided on that ridge, I had a moment. And I did not use it.
I told myself it would not happen. Then I told myself it had happened and could not be undone. Then I went home and oiled my skin and put on my wrapper and stood at this woman's burial rites and wept as though I had lost something. When I was the one who had helped take it. I am ashamed. Not of what the village now thinks of me, of who I was on that ridge. That person is the thing I have to live inside.
The square held that. Then all eyes moved to Adeze. Adeze had not moved. She was still standing at the back of the gathering, still looking at nothing, her jaw still set. And for a long moment it seemed like she would not rise, would not speak, would hold her stillness against the weight of the entire village looking at her and simply refuse. Then she walked forward, not to the center, not all the way, but forward enough that her voice would carry.
I pushed her.
3 words. The square received them and did not release them.
I pushed her because I believed the prophecy was mine and she had taken it from me by existing. I know how that sounds. I have known how it sounds since before I did it. I do not ask you to forgive me. I do not think forgiveness is what this moment is for. I am saying, before these people, before your family, before whatever comes next, I pushed you. I wanted you gone. And I was wrong in every direction a person can be wrong.
She stopped. She did not sit. She stood in the forward space she had claimed and waited, the way a person waits when they have said the true thing and have no more prepared. Amara rose. The square shifted. She walked to the center and stood where she had stood 4 days ago when she had returned. Same ground, same indigo, same unhurried posture of a woman who has decided that the truth is the only house worth living in.
She looked at each of the 3 women in turn, not with hatred, not with the cold performance of a woman showing the village her own virtue. She looked at them the way she had always looked at people and was seen. And seeing, did what she had always done. She told the truth.
I loved you. All 3 of you. That was real. And nothing that happened on that ridge makes it unreal. What you did was also real. Both things are true, and I will not make either of them smaller for the sake of making this easier to witness.
She turned to the chief elder.
I want justice, not revenge. I want what this village does to mean something, so that what was done to me is not simply absorbed into the ground and forgotten. I want it to mean something for the next girl who is given something others want to take.
Chief Elder Obiara nodded.
Then it will mean something. This village will decide together what that looks like, starting now.
The drums did not resume immediately. The square sat in the weight of what had been said. Let it settle. Let it become the new ground beneath their feet. Because ground, once it has shifted, does not go back to what it was. It only becomes what comes next. The village deliberated for 2 days. This was not unusual. Abara had its own way of deciding things, not quickly, not loudly, but thoroughly. The way deep water moves with a force that is not visible on the surface, but arrives at its destination with the full weight of everything behind it. Elders consulted elders. Families sat with the question in the privacy of their compounds. Women who had never been invited into formal deliberations found themselves consulted anyway, because Mama Chinyere moved through the village in those 2 days like a woman with a purpose, stopping here, listening there, and the things she said to the chief elder when she was done moved the deliberation in a direction that older traditions might not have taken it. Kolade stayed. He did not insert himself into the deliberations. He sat with Amara's family in the evenings, and he walked with Amara in the early mornings when the village was still finding its feet. And he said very little except when she wanted to talk, and then he listened the way he had always listened, as though what she was saying was the most important navigation he had ever been given. On the morning of the third day, the elders delivered their judgment. Ngozi and Chidima were not banished. This surprised people who had expected the harshest outcome, and then when it was explained, stopped surprising them. Mama Chinyere had made the argument herself.
Banishment sends them away. It cleans our square of them and lets us feel resolved. But this village made them. This village taught Ngozi that beauty was her only currency and then was startled when she spent it badly. This village taught Chidima that money bought standing and then was surprised when she learned to value standing above everything else. We do not send them away. We keep them here, where what they have done is known, and we watch whether they become something different. It is also a truer one.
The elders had listened and agreed. Ngozi and Chidima would remain in Abara. They would perform public service to the village, not as punishment theater, not as humiliation, but as the slow, practical work of women rebuilding their place in a community that had seen them clearly. The market women who had been overlooked would receive their labor. The children who had no one to teach them would receive their time. Whether the village ever returned to them what they had lost was not decreed. It would be end or it would not, and the village would decide based on what it witnessed over time. When the judgment was read, Ngozi sat with her hands in her lap and her face very still and said nothing. Later, walking home with only her mother beside her, she stopped in the middle of the road and stood there for a moment.
I thought they would send me away.
I know.
Staying is harder.
Yes, that is why they chose it.
She took her daughter's arm, and they walked the rest of the way home in the particular silence of two women who have much to say and have decided that today is not the day to say all of it. Chidima received the judgment without tears, which was how people knew it had landed properly. She nodded once when the elder finished speaking, a single, small, unadorned nod, and then she went directly to the section of the market where the oldest women sold their goods. Women her family had always considered beneath deliberate notice, and she asked what needed doing. The woman she asked, old Mama Ekele, who had been selling groundnut oil from the same spot for 40 years, looked at her for a long moment before answering. What Mama Ekele said was never repeated publicly, but Chidima was seen at that market store the following morning, and every morning after, and the mornings after that. And people who passed by said that she walked without complaint and without the careful dignity she had once arranged around herself like expensive fabric. The fabric, it turned out, had been covering the person. Now the person was visible. Whether anyone would like what they saw remained to be decided. For Adaeze, the judgment was different. She would leave Abara, not because the village could not hold the complexity of her remaining, but because what she had done occupied a different category. Chidima had failed to act. Ngozi had failed to stop it. Adaeze had chosen. She had stood on the ridge and made a decision with her hands and her will and her specific, deliberate fury, and a person had nearly died from that decision. The village could absorb many things. It could not rebuild around a center that pretended otherwise. She would go to her mother's family in the east. She would be received there because family receives, but she would be received as someone carrying a known thing. What she made of herself in that place, in that knowledge, was between her and whatever she was willing to become. When the elder finished reading her portion of the judgment, Adaeze stood and looked at Amara.
I used to wonder why everyone always looked at you in the end. I understand it now.
She did not say it bitterly, or perhaps she did, and bitterness had finally found its honest resting place in something that was also true.
I hope you find something worth looking at when you look at yourself, Adaeze. I mean that.
Adaeze held her gaze for a moment. Then she nodded once and walked out of the square. And Abara watched her go and nobody called her back. On the evening of the 5th day since her return, Amara sat with Kolade at the edge of her family's compound where the light came in low and gold across the top of the walls. He had told her what his father had said. She had listened without interrupting, which was how she listened to everything. Afterwards, she had been quiet for a long time. Not the absence of words quiet, but the kind that is building towards something.
You do not have to decide today
I know.
or tomorrow.
I know that's too.
The light doing what evening light does, making everything it touches look like it has been considered.
When I was in the river, I did not think about the prophecy. I did not think about the council seat or what I was supposed to become. I thought about the village. I thought about my mother's hands. I thought about the road to the square, which I have walked so many times I do not count the steps. I thought about the women who have lived and died in this place and were never asked what they could carry.
And now?
Now I think I can carry more than one thing. I think home does not have to be the thing you leave to become who you are. I think it can be the thing you return to and remake.
He looked at her.
You are going to say yes to the council seat.
I am going to say yes to everything it was always supposed to open. The seat, your father's offer, the road forward. And I am saying yes to you, not because you found me, because of who you were when you found me and who you have been every day since.
Kolade was quiet for a moment, then
My father is going to be insufferable about being right.
Amara laughed. Open, unguarded, the laugh of a woman who has come through the worst thing and found that joy is still available on the other side of it. Not as reward, but as proof. Proof that what had been given to her was not diminished by what had been done to her. Proof that a thing rooted deeply enough survives even the hands that try to tear it out. Mama Chieri passed the entrance to the compound at that moment, as she sometimes did in evenings, walking the village the way she had always walked it, touching its edges, keeping it whole. She paused at the sound of Amara's laughter. She looked in. She said nothing. She simply smiled, the small, private smile of a woman who said something true once under the weight of 7 days fasting before a gathered village and has lived to watch it come to pass. Then she walked on into the evening, into the village that was already quietly, slowly, irrevocably beginning to become a different version of itself. The prophecy had always known where it was going. It had simply been waiting for Amara to be ready to arrive. End. If you enjoyed this story and watched till the end, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. It really helps us bring you more amazing stories like this. And don't stop here. There's another lovely story already on your screen. Click it. You're going to love this one too.